Hello and welcome to the New Frontier podcast. Very excited to have our first ever guest on the show. But before I introduce him, I want to mention to everybody in the standard podcast format that we have an incredible guest now booked out every single week until the end of March, including Kelsey from Lunch with Norm, Gary from the Seven-Figure Seller Summit, Kevin King, and much more. And next week, we're going to do an in-depth analysis of Rufus and AI search on marketplaces. So please hit the follow or subscribe button to get these in your feeds. But yeah, done with that bit. So welcome, Harry. Harry Gill, one of my best friends. 8 years strategy director in BBH. He's worked with some of the biggest brands in the world, including Google, Samsung, and Heineken. So, Harry, welcome. How are you?
Hi, I'm good, thank you. I'm tired. We live in a tower block of very small flats, and our neighbour has an Alsatian and a newborn baby, and we don't really get on. So yeah, last night wasn't great, but I'm very excited to be here. AI is great. Let's chat about it.
As we'll get into, yeah. I mean, I've stayed in your flat. I think once in my kind of like founder story. Hopefully one day, staying in Harry's flat is kind of a big part of it. When I've been to New York, sleeping on the floor in between the doorway and the toilet.
It's a lovely.
It's a struggle that we've been through. Joe, how are you?
I'm all right. Yes, I am. I'm pretty chuffed that it's Friday. I have to say it's been a very long week, so I'm ready for the weekend and not talking or thinking about AI. Like, fuck AI for the weekend. I can't take it anymore. But anyway, we're very excited.
Yeah, it's gonna be a great hour.
It's gonna be great. Right. So, I mean, shall we get on with this? Because I'm quite excited to hear about Harry. He's not my best friend, but hopefully, maybe in the future, who knows? But Harry, so you work for a very, very famous creative agency, but I'm not going to ruin it all. Like, who is BBH and what do they do?
Yeah, for sure. So BBH is a advertising agency founded in London in kind of the early 1980s. And essentially, I think they're built on this kind of idea of the power of difference to make a difference. So there's loads of crap advertising. I'd say advertising is like, a lot of it's like a sewer, really. Like, let's say 80% of advertising is not very good. And it's not serving brands particularly well. And I think an issue of that is that a lot of it is just very samey. So you're just producing things that look exactly like everyone else is producing. It doesn't really offer the viewer anything. It's not particularly exciting, and it's not very memorable. And so BBH is kind of founded on this philosophy that actually, if you really kind of take stock of kind of what culture looks like at the moment, what the kind of commercial world looks like at the moment, and you find those points of difference, you find what's truly different about your brand, what's kind of intrinsic to the DNA, that is what's going to make your brand kind of go to that next level. And that's what's going to help your kind of marketing and your commercial side grow. So it's all around this idea of difference, which I think makes it very interesting, actually, as a philosophy to enter into this world of AI, which is all about kind of taking everything, you know, the power of the crowd, you know, the mass kind of intelligence of things, and using that to find a way forward. So I feel like there's a weird tension there of kind of like the individual and difference versus the crowd. So yeah, so it's an interesting time to have that philosophy.
Super interesting, Harry.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I'm really, really, really excited to actually hear your point of view, because you know, I guess me and Max are always beavering away on the e-commerce side, but actually the creative side and sort of the advertising point of it is actually going to have such a big reshuffle. So really excited to see what you guys are doing.
Yeah, me too. I mean, it's definitely this. I mean, I've been in the industry, for 8 years, but this feels like the biggest kind of reshuffle moment that I've seen. And it's just, I think, interestingly, if you look at kind of where things have gone, like the last 20 years, all the technological shifts have been on kind of like the supply side of things. So like, what kind of platforms are you showing up on? How do you reach people? How do you use consumer data and first-party data and things like that? But actually, this is the first time you've got technology influencing the creation of the adverts itself and the kind of creativity side, which feels like quite a fundamental change. So it's really exciting to kind of be at this moment in time, I guess.
Yeah. And I'd love to get into how it's disrupting the workflows you mentioned, Harry. But first, maybe bearing in mind a lot of our listeners are kind of e-commerce sellers. How do like the top end brands that you've worked with, how did they think about advertising before AI, a year or two ago? What was the process that you helped people with?
Yeah, for sure. So I think like the biggest struggle for these big brands is finding kind of consistency and distinctiveness. So these huge brands turn up in every kind of platform, in every kind of space in consumers' lives. They often get very complicated. We have kind of sub-products, we have different markets and different kind of needs and all these kind of things. And so there's lots of kind of messaging to balance. But within that, you've got to find a consistency that when you show up, immediately, that's IKEA. That kind of completely sounds like in their tone of voice. That's their kind of take on the world, that kind of thing. And so I think the job of the good advertising agency is helping brands navigate all this stuff to make it feel easy and kind of intuitive, that actually when your brand shows up there, it very naturally feels part of how your brand is. And when it shows up over there, it still fits the kind of platform and the new space it's in, but it still feels part of the same brand. And so I guess finding that kind of consistency across all these different spaces, across all these different kind of ways of communication is the challenge. And that's kind of been the hardest thing the last decade or so, is that there's so many kind of exploding new places to show up. How do you keep a brand feeling consistent? So that's probably where most, I'd say, marketers' heads are at, that kind of challenge.
And so how has AI actually disrupted the workflow in terms of what you guys doing?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like, I'd say in an advertising sense, we're kind of in the cowboy period. Like nothing's been very formalized, nothing's very fixed. And so basically all I know is just kind of the kind of experimental stuff that me and my colleagues have been kind of getting up to. Like we haven't been taught anything, we're just kind of like winging it, using these tools because they're just firstly, they're so intuitive. So it's very easy to just try things out, see how it works for you, see if it doesn't. So like a few things I think are really interesting is that actually if for us as an agency, our whole thing is built on difference and making different advertising, AI is actually a really useful tool to understand what's currently out there, what are you pushing against, what's the sameness, what are the tropes you're pushing against. There's something we've been kind of working with, is like this idea of using AI to build like the most like conventional tropey adverts. So you can show a client, this is what everyone expects you to do. This is, if you're doing advertising on autopilot, this is what you'll produce. And then it's a really good way to actually kind of keep you honest, to go, actually, okay, so that's the base level 6 out of 10. How do we do something that's actually interesting and different? I actually prepared something for you if you want to see it.
Yeah, let's do it.
Which is like, so it's just a useful way. I think it's a good tool. You feed into ChatGPT, basically the brief, right, that the client gives you, and you go, okay, so this is how a robot would tackle your brief. So the brief I gave ChatGPT was, write an inspiring TV commercial for an American bank that wants to be seen as trustworthy. Quite a classic kind of brief, to be honest. Everyone's trying to build trust, but it's a very difficult thing to do, especially through kind of communication. If you say, trust me, I'm trustworthy, it's not really enough, right?
Yeah.
So it's an interesting challenge. So this is what the robot came up with. We open with a warm, picturesque view of a small American town with a rising sun, casting a golden glow over the landscape. A close-up of a bank building with a friendly teller at the window, greeting a customer. In the heart of America, there's a bank that believes in the power of trust. Cut to a father teaching his daughter to save money, placing coins into a piggy bank. Cut to a young couple receiving keys to their new home from a real estate agent. Narrator comes back in. Trust is more than just a word to us. It's the foundation of every dream, every aspiration. A quick moving montage of scenes showcasing happy customers, families buying homes, entrepreneurs starting businesses, people shaking hands. Narrator, insert bank name. We are not the bank. We're your partners in financial security. From your first savings account to financing your future. We've been here for generations, earning your trust every step of the way. Because at insert bank name, trust is built one handshake at a time. We close on a final uplifting shot of a small American town with a bank at its center, under the clear blue sky. A close-up of a bank's logo shining brightly. Insert bank name, where trust builds dreams.
I would sign up for insert bank name. I mean, they sound really, really trustworthy.
Yeah.
But actually, I wanted to ask you, Harry, because this is like just a question that popped to my head. So here's a little bit of a challenge for you. Like I completely get how AI would be awesome in terms of kind of getting these benchmarks and using it for a lot of inspiration. But part of my problem with AI is as well is that it's all fed based off previous data. It's all based off previous creation, and so in a sense, it can enable creativity, but it can also turn creativity into like a complete cliche. I mean, sorry to say, but as much as this
point, right? Yeah, I mean, I think that's Harry's point. AI is, if I'm getting it, understanding you right, Harry, like it's completely cliched, and therefore you're using this to kind of say, this is a cliche answer. We're going to do something which is completely different. Like, is that kind of...
It's a really good point. Yeah, it's like a cliche machine. It just kind of spits them out, which is really helpful because we all kind of recognize cliches, but it's quite,
I think this is like it's super translatable in the e-commerce space where I'm imagining you put in your listing into ChatGPT and you're going to just get like the same boring kind of bank in middle America with various people shaking hands and smiling. And I completely get the point, which is it doesn't do anything for anyone. And I think going a level deeper technically, like I know these models are basically like completely sanitized, because the biggest worry that OpenAI or anyone else has is, what if we say something which is like horribly offensive or racist, like, or whatever, and therefore like all this stuff, like I saw something on Twitter on which I can't quite remember, but like the amount of compute which is going just to like sanitize these answers and like the safety layer that these companies are putting on. Like you're right, like you need to be like, if you want to be using AI, you need to be using something where you've kind of got that unleashed and you've built something special for the use case. If you're just going to be kind of trotting out what ChatGPT gives you, it's going to be really samey and dull.
Yeah, you definitely kind of have to.
Sorry.
No, you go.
I just wanted to say, like, I think to an extent you can introduce more randomness in the model in terms of what you actually get. But in essence, like, there is obviously the problem is the constant moderation, and like what essentially the preset is already sort of like loaded up in the model, and so that's the bit that is actually difficult to like get around, which is this PC-ness.
That's a really interesting point, because I think something we're learning as well is you can throw AI off balance a little bit, and that makes it, that kind of introducing randomness, I think, is really interesting. So like if you say, write about the new banana that's just been released, but in the style of Don Draper, or write about the new banana, give me 10 paradoxes about the new Samsung flip phone, whatever, and just like pushing the AI so it's not answering straight and it's trying to work out what's the paradox, what's unusual about this, or how would I do it in the voice of a character. Find it's really helpful actually, because it kind of throws it slightly off balance, and so you get a slightly less cliched answer. So yeah, that's quite interesting. The idea of introducing randomness, I think, is really interesting.
Yeah. So Harry, so the first way you're doing this,
you can also do it. Sorry, go on. I'm just really good at interrupting people, so I'm gonna stop doing that.
So am I, don't worry.
Yeah, I was just gonna say. So I'm guessing like what the first way you've said this is like revolutionizing your workflow is you're going to customers and you're saying, look at this like standard boring starting point. We're gonna go like completely left of center here, which is super interesting. Is there any other ways that this is disrupting kind of the creative industries?
Yeah, I mean, all sorts of ways. I think like one thing is just, it sounds stupid, but it's just like having a second version of Google. I use obviously Google all the time, but like it's just an interesting way because actually you can ask it questions that are kind of slightly abstract. Like, I don't know, who is the celebrity who's been in a soda commercial where they're playing against the thing they're famous for being, or something? You know, something like very like particular, where you're trying to find a precedent in marketing to use to a client in an argument, or even just inspiration or whatever. Those kind of weird questions where if you Google it, you just won't get anything because it's too kind of natural. And so traditionally, that is what you'd give a junior strategist. I'm going to probably spend an afternoon losing my mind on the internet trying to work this thing out. But AI can just do it. I think it just has that ability to kind of stretch and understand a question in a slightly more human way than a search engine can do. And so that kind of thing, I think, is really liberating because there's no real cost to it, because it's such a quick thing, and I don't feel guilty that I'm wasting someone's afternoon searching up Ryan Gosling's whatever. You know, I'm not kind of doing that. You can basically just go down all these different rabbit holes with very little cost to yourself or the agency. And so I find that kind of ability to just like pursue things and pursue strange ideas is just incredibly helpful. So that's been really liberating.
And can I ask? Actually, I wanted to like this is something that I've always wondered. Obviously, a lot of, in terms of stakeholder empowerment, a lot of companies are now enthusiastically kind of motivating people. Okay, use AI, like use ChatGPT, whatever. Do you try to figure out ways to use it in your day to day? But I'm wondering, like agencies like BBH, do they actually invest in building their own AI systems where, for example, they scan all of the library of previous advertising to actually find interesting patterns or insights from that on? Because obviously this is a really powerful library of information that any agency would have, and that can actually be used in the future, I can imagine.
Yeah, definitely. And there's definitely a big race to do that, because it's a huge advantage if you can be the first person to really crack that. We're part of a broader holding company who are definitely doing lots of that kind of stuff. I don't know enough about it to really talk about it without really kind of getting in trouble. But
I can answer, Joe, because I funnily enough, one of my angel investors is in marketing, like in the ads world, and I spent a bit of time talking to, like, not BBH but similar competitors about, like, this is in 2020, like early 2023, so just right at the start of this. And I think they kind of, like, I know some agencies have built AI agencies, but from what I like follow from them, like they built like mini, like Harry, I don't know BBH, but maybe a competitor, they've got like an AI agency in house, but they just don't have, like, technical talent to do this is so rare and expensive. Like they don't have that, right? Like you know, to find the people who are going to be able to, like, LLMs have been, no one was working with LLMs in 2021, right? And now suddenly everyone wants an expert in these places, and the talent is like in Perplexity, OpenAI, you know, Bard, Mike's, like, and even there they can't hire them. So I don't, like, from what I've seen, I think the industry isn't really, like, able to really go to that level. But I don't know, Harry, like maybe you guys have found a way of, you know, coaxing some of these people out of you know, their $900,000 pay OpenAI and come to BBH to train some models.
I mean, it sounds unlikely, but maybe we have. I don't know. It's above my pay grade, Max.
So Joe, like you know, as you know, I'm a big fan of your newsletter. You were talking about advertising in an AI in one of the latest ones. Do you want to go into a bit about that and like what you were mentioning?
So one of the things that I read recently and I posted about in the newsletter is actually Meta coming out and saying that with all of their new AI tools that they have integrated in their platforms, They've seen a significant increase in conversion rate, essentially campaigns being much more efficient in terms of the creation and just the entire cycle of sort of that part of online social media marketing it seems like it's really changing up things. Now, obviously, this is not something that is so widely taken over by lots of advertisers yet. So this is coming from Meta. Of course, they're going to say it's great. But I guess, yeah, the question is like, have you already started seeing, Harry, I guess in these kind of like more palpable improvements in performance, let's say from a digital marketing perspective, when you use AI as part of your creative strategy?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So we've seen, I think you can see clear improvements in efficiency, but effectiveness is actually quite challenging to measure in marketing, definitely over short term, because you've kind of got to see the whole picture in terms of what you're doing for your brand. And so if you had AI content that was very quick to produce and seems to be driving clicks or engagements with sales or whatever your metrics are, you've also got to factor in what it's doing long term for the brand, because it might short term be very effective, but actually it's making your brand look cheap, or it's making your brand looking very similar to one of your competitors. And so actually long term, you're kind of, you're diminishing your returns essentially. And so that is something we're still kind of trying to gauge and get a sense of. And I think fundamentally we've got to stick to like our philosophy, which is the idea that kind of difference will pay off in the long run. And so kind of having a distinct place in the market will always pay off. And so whether it's using AI or not using AI, I think sticking to that philosophy of understanding that you're going to grow a business by having a very clear, distinct point of view in that category is really helpful. So yeah, efficiency wise, we've definitely seen, in terms of both actually the marketing you're putting out, but also just the way we work, you have designers who could be spending all day designing something, can now mock something up in 3 minutes, which is just crazy. That's like the invention of the steam train. Like it's just such an insane kind of leap. So that's really interesting. But yeah, in terms of like long-term effectiveness, it's a much more slippery fish to kind of get a sense of. So yeah, so wait and see, I think.
I have a question. I'm going to say it now before I interrupt everyone. So I'm raising my hand. I actually am really excited to know this. So in my old days, when I just graduated from university, I had a brief stint as an intern as part of an advertising agency. It's a curious fact for you. And so I know a little bit about the structure in terms of how advertising agencies work. And obviously you have the account managers, and then obviously you have the creative team. Now, I'm very curious because this point about essentially AI enabling everyone to have sort of their creative vision mocked up, regardless whether they have any creative previous experience, is really amazing. Like, sometimes like, I have really lots of ideas, but before I couldn't actually show them. And now you have something like Midjourney, which is able to spit something close to what you imagine. So in terms of the functions of the different roles within the creative agency, has there been a shift? So have, for example, more of the account team started trying to translate what they are taking from the client and they're envisaging to the creative team? And has there been any sort of clashes from that?
That's really interesting. That's
a great question.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's only going to get better. But you're right, because actually, so agencies are basically, as you said, split into two kind of broad things for people on the outside who might not know about it. We've got kind of creatives who are obviously brilliant and very good at their jobs, but they're essentially creatives. And so you're dealing with a personality type who, I guess, view the world in a way that's quite different to the account managers, who are very much more structured and all about kind of relationships and timelines and that kind of stuff. So two very different ways of thinking about the world. And so I guess sometimes issues occur when you're trying to bridge the gap between those two kind of ways of thinking. And so I think you're right. I think like tools like ChatGPT or Midjourney, you suddenly give the more kind of, rational thinking people the tools to communicate. You almost give them a creative language so they can express things. Even like I know some creatives who just kind of think visually, which as like a words person, I find quite mind blowing, to be honest. I find it hard to get my head around that. But using Midjourney, you can give them a brief in a visual sense, and they'll get it. And that would never be available to you without that technology. So it's kind of, it is really interesting. It's like getting like, the fish of Babel. It's like a way of actually getting people to talk to each other across kind of that divide, which I think is really exciting. So definitely been, you're kind of democratizing creativity a little bit.
And I've actually seen this in e-content, right? Which is amazing. I've seen like prompt engineers who, we basically have a team prompt engineers who generate images for potential customers, and we have a sales team go out and like send them to the customer, like, hey, look, you can do any content. And the prompt engineers are like writing sales scripts. They're like, here, because they've got ChatGPT, so these are not technical, these are not like commercial salesy people, but they're like, literally saw it this morning, like, why don't you try this script if it's working better, which I think is great. Like you're getting, I think it's working both ways. You're getting non-creative people expressing ideas, and you're getting like technical people being like, well, what about this, that, and the other. So I think it's a really cool benefit. But yeah, Harry, obviously there's drawbacks, as there is with everything in life. So what have you noticed that people should be watching out for? What are the drawbacks here?
I mean, the one that worries me, like in a professional sense, existential. I've got bigger ones.
In a professional sense, please. Yeah.
But in a professional sense, in a professional sense, like I do worry about people in the first 3 years of their career. Maybe I think it's, you learn so much of your job by doing donkey work and just kind of like stuff that isn't time efficient. Learning isn't a time efficient exercise. You have to kind of do that kind of grueling stuff. You have to do stuff which feels kind of pointless sometimes, because that is generally how you learn, through that repetition, through pursuing things that are pointless. And also, managing and like helping someone learn is also something that takes up a lot of time. And so with AI, obviously you can cut out a lot of that time expended, and it feels good for the business, it feels good for the manager, but you are severely, limiting someone's exposure below you. And so I do worry a little bit about actually what work and opportunity is going to come to the most junior people in an organization, in any organization really, in these kind of like white collar jobs. So I think that's an interesting challenge. I think like short term, there'll be a few junior people who can like ride the AI wave, where like, for maybe C-suite don't understand anything about it. But if you're like 22 and you get it and you found an interesting way to use this to your advantage, you could probably go up quite quickly. You could be in meetings you'd never normally be allowed to be in, that kind of stuff. So there's opportunity for a few people, I think. But generally,
they're following Joe's newsletter and LinkedIn with all the tips.
Yeah, that is a top tip. But yeah, generally, I do worry about that kind of like full in kind of education of like hands-on learning.
So I'll put the counterpoint out to this, which is, if you even look at search, which is like something that I'm thinking about a lot now, because we have Amazon just launching Rufus and the rest of it, and we touched on this last week, but you have for decades you only basically had Google, and now you have Google, you have Bing, you have Perplexity AI, which is a fantastic tool. You have which are doing so. Like, I think AI enables so many different ways, and you have Arc as well, who do kind of like I came across them the other day. They do like search query straight to answer. So like there's no results, there's no conversation. It's just AI. You put in the question and up pops the answer. And imagine like, over time it's going to get really good at just giving you exactly what you want without even like having to read anything. So like it's there's so much innovation that is powering. I think we're going to see a real flattening of, hopefully not as many monoliths or and like single companies dominating, and therefore like people working in like across lots of different industries. Joe, what do you think?
I actually like it. Something that you just said really rang a bell for me, and like an uncomfortable bell. Um, this is really worrying if you really think about it. The fact that we will just have one, like we would type in a query, and the AI would somehow just pick one thing that is going to show us, and this will be the thing that we will take as the actual truth. How crazy it is that, like, we will be essentially getting the answer that the AI would want to show us, right? For the moment, we have this kind of democracy of information to an extent. I mean, obviously, you can go deeper down the rabbit hole, but you go onto Google or whatever search engine you are, and you scroll and scroll and scroll, and through the scrolling, you decide what you actually want to read. And now we're going to have an AI that points us exactly towards the thing that it thinks that we want to read. And so it's first, there's so many problems about this. Like, firstly, like, do I really want to trust the AI to tell me what I want to read? And is this really the answer that I'm looking for? Secondly, it's exactly the same thing with the Spotify AI, which basically puts me into this pool of exactly the same songs I've been listening for the last 10 years, and I never discover anything new, which is, you basically end up reading the same information. You never get inspired by anything new because it's so tailored and customized towards your needs that you just get the same plava that you would normally want to read. So we're gonna all become really boring shit people. I mean, oh man, like, this was depressing. Thanks, Max. Triggered.
Yeah. No, I agree. I agree in some senses that I was actually watching the ARC demo. You should watch it afterwards. It's quite interesting. And I was thinking, I don't want this because, like, you're right. I don't want to be told. I don't want it to direct me to something. I prefer like the Perplexity way, where they give you the paragraph and they give you like the different, like, 6 references. But anyway, my point more was, I think there's going to be a lot of different ways of doing stuff. Whereas, we've had big companies like Facebook dominating, all social media. I think if we roll forward 10, 20 years, maybe we'll have like lots of fragmented things, which I think is good rather than bad. But I do agree with the point that AI, like 6 companies or whatever it is, building models that determine how humans like think and find stuff is bad.
Yeah, I do think, I mean, culturally, I do think there's been a shift towards like summation. Like, I think we just all love things being wrapped up into like a single, unnuanced take every time. Like, even myself, I just found like I now read articles, but sometimes I just skip straight to the comments, which is just kind of mental. But I'm just trying to get like a summation of just this whole fucking thing into like just a very like pithy, like, what is the takeout from it? And I think that is quite like an AI. I think AI feeds into that mindset, that need to actually boil everything down. It's just one single takeaway that everyone can have, and that is the correct black or white kind of answer on something, rather than kind of a world of nuance and things being kind of complicated and contextual and stuff. So yeah, anyway, but yeah, it's kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm. So Harry, when we talked last week, you mentioned a really interesting disadvantage, kind of on a more tactical level, which I had not thought of before, around Midjourney and privacy. Do you want to go into a bit of that?
Yeah, so this is kind of what I was saying about, like, we're in this kind of cowboy stage where people are still trying to figure things out. So I was working on a pitch about 6 months ago, and I was on Midjourney just generally, and I was like, oh, it'd be interesting to search for this particular brand. It was not particularly. It's the type of brand where no one's going to be really doing stuff on it in their spare time. It's very, very dull, to be honest. So I looked at Midjourney, just curious to see who would type in this brand name. And weirdly, because it's kind of public, there were loads and loads and loads of results. And they're all so specific, and they're all in the last week or something. And so essentially it's a window into what the other agencies were designing. So their designers were using Midjourney to tackle this pitch. So suddenly I was snooping on all this stuff, and like they were putting the brand into space. They were doing things with Snoop Dogg. Like, I could very clearly see, what the other agency were exploring for this brand, and like that was just fascinating, because suddenly you think, but obviously they don't realize that it's not a private platform they're using. And suddenly you just kind of see all the implications of this, and kind of the fact that we're all kind of learning together how to use these technologies is actually kind of scary. And, you know, you're taking brands, you know, we're meant to be kind of stewards of brands, and you're kind of endangering them by throwing them into these places without really consideration. But yeah, I mean, BBH and the holding group we're under have like their own private Midjourney thingy, I think.
You've got Midjourney Pro, do you?
Midjourney Pro. So it's all, the stewardship's fine. You could sleep easy.
Yeah. Out of interest, did you win the pitch or did they win the pitch?
We did win the pitch, yeah.
Oh, there we go.
Good news. After all.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's a really interesting point, and it's a very kind of like tactical point to a wider point, which is who owns this data that you're putting into AI models, and if it's a public model, you know, if you're working with ChatGPT or whatever to develop your brand, are you suddenly going to get, you know, assuming that 90% of the internet in 4 years becomes AI generated, and the only human generated stuff is what people put into the ChatGPT, are you going to suddenly get like your things that you've been writing on, if you're on a free version, and playing around with it as a company in that training data set that your competitors that like when they're pulling ideas? And the answer probably is yes to that question. But yeah, Joe, any final things about disadvantages before maybe we move on to some advantages to stop being so you know, doomsday about it?
No, yeah, that's okay. It's okay to be doomsday about it, because I think, like, you know, the more we think about these things, the more there is awareness. I think it's really important that we are aware about the risk of all of us becoming really dull and live in a world of dull content because everyone's so lazy, right? So, I mean, this is why I think actually creative agencies will have a golden opportunity, because it's really the creativity, the new fresh ideas that are going to make massive difference to everything that we consume. Because, you know, the people who don't invest in good advertising and like human-made advertising are going to just basically churn the same shit content. So I think it's important to know what good looks like and what it doesn't. But yeah, no, let's get positive. So what are the advantages? No, we talked about advantages.
So we talked about some of the advantages in terms of enabling you to be different, and yeah, kind of the exploration. So maybe we should talk about some costs. So I saw again, like it's interesting that you talked a lot about this stuff, advertising your newsletter this week. It's quite good for, you know, preparing for the podcast. So Joe, I saw in your newsletter you said that you think this is going to increase the cost for brands.
Yeah.
So do you want to explain why? Because you know, I have a different view, but go on.
Fine. Okay. Well, you're already putting me on the back foot, because you're already going to be like, you know, like, you know, you always do that. You like, let me go first. And then you go into like a completely well thought about debating point that completely, anyway. So why is it going to get more expensive? Firstly, running AI is really, really expensive. You have, firstly, very expensive chips. Very expensive cost to actually maintaining all of this data, to train the models. Very expensive is because of also water usage. I don't know if many people know about this, but AI models needs ton of water. I think I read a stat, which was half a year ago, so maybe it's improved, but about half a year ago, a sort of an average ChatGPT query requires half a liter of water, or like 5 messages. Wow. It was something really small, and that requires 5. Yeah. So yeah, we should all feel very guilty when we chat shit with ChatGPT.
Are they just, you know, throwing it at some engineer somewhere?
Yeah, the poor engineers that are actually answering all of our queries. There is no ChatGPT. It's just a bunch of people getting dehydrated. No, it's huh?
Do you know what they're actually doing with it? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, so they're cooling down. They're cooling down all all of the machinery, right? So this is the very technical way to explain it, but it's fine. You guys understand. So yeah, it's very expensive from that. Yeah. So it's very expensive from that point of view. But the sort of the second kind of more, I guess the newer way to think about cost is because is the way AI models are going to reshape our consumer behavior and how we actually search for products. So, Rufus Duffus came out yesterday or so. It's basically the new way Amazon allows people to interact with the Amazon environment and search for products and get like insight into what is the best product and what are the best features. Google is obviously rolling out their search generative experience, which is similar thing where you don't actually search for a keyword, you search for product. Walmart did the same thing. So the point is, as consumers, we are not going to go and search for a keyword and then search for another one until we find the right thing and click through a lot of advertising throughout that. We're going to essentially go through almost like a chat experience where we would get a curated list of results. And within that, there will be far less browsing and far more curated advertising done from the respective search engine, whether it's Amazon or Google or whatever. And in this mindset, what we need to understand is that the actual advertising slots that will be available will be significantly reduced, because at the end of the day, you don't get 4 slots anymore. You get maybe 1 or 2 specifically tailored by that engine. So we'll probably get a significant reduction in the search space. I don't know about other platforms, but the search space, I think, is going to get reduced. That was a monologue, so I'm going to stop now. Max, go on. Tell me why I'm wrong.
Harry, what are your thoughts? Well, I'd say on the search, I agree with everything you said. Apart from, I just feel that if people are currently spending like 8% of their revenue or something on PPC, right, or whatever it is, something around that number, I just don't think that PPC is going to make up such a big budget anymore. I just think with new LLMs, like quality content is going to be more important, and PPC pay-per-click ads is just going to kind of fade away into something that it feels so 2020, 2015 eventually is my view. But how, what, like, in terms of the kind of more strategic types of advertising that you deal with, what do you think is going to happen on the cost side?
So I think for costs are going to have to so agencies are billed on time. So you get a agency and it's all timesheets. So you pay for like 20 hours of a creative director, 10 hours of a strategist a week, that kind of thing. And so actually, I think AI is going to fundamentally change how all these agencies are set up, because I don't think you can bill on time anymore when it takes 2 minutes to mock up a design or something. So everything's going to get massively compressed, which is going to cause like a fundamental shift in actually how agency models work and how they survive, essentially. So essentially, I mean, this might be too inside baseball, but I think agencies are going to have to start selling on output. So start selling on adverts versus selling on time, which actually could be a very good thing, because you could then potentially start selling advertising to brands based on how effective it is. And you directly tie, if this advert sells you this many Beanie Babies, you'll get this amount of money per year from you, that kind of thing. So I mean, that's maybe too the niche geeky answer, but like in terms of kind of how it's going to affect us as an agencies world, it's going to have to shift to selling on output, which will basically, I think it's going to be a big crush, and you'll see lots of mediocre agencies fold because I don't think they can survive under that shift potentially. So I think Joe, you're saying like for people who can do it well and can do actually a kind of interesting creativity, might do quite well at this new AI landscape. But I think there's going to be a lot of terrible advertising as well. And so there's going to be a bit more of a divide. So there'll be a few kind of like bespoke agencies that do well, there'll be a lot that kind of just wither. The kind of middle ones will wither, and then the bad, cheap ones are going to kind of get by and be fine. Would be how I see it.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And it actually reminds me, as you know, I've just come back from being in the Bay for a few months, and kind of the big discussion there is that traditionally SaaS companies would bill per seat, right? So you'd have some software, maybe you have Airtable, you'd sell it to a company, they'd get 5 people on, it would work well, you expand it to 50, you expand it to 100, you expand it to that, and that's how you become like a, you know, multi-million-dollar company. But now, like, the whole point of AI is that you don't need a lot of people, and it should be increasing their efficiency. So like this whole, I mean, it's exactly the same, like not in terms of the time hours, but like this whole like per seat model, which is basically how a lot of, you know, companies are built. Think like you know, Google Drive, or like, you know, most companies will bill on a seat level. That's dead now, because the point is you have less people, you make them like 100 times more effective with your service, which you should do, and therefore, like, why on earth would you expand? You're not going to expand a service to put anyone else on it, because it should be done with 1 or 2. So it's this new like business models are super interesting. And what was being discussed, and I'd love to see if it actually, when it happens, is basically you charge them like a premium for your service, and then you charge them the tokens back, like the OpenAI tokens, the Stable Diffusion tokens. So like that's kind of like what people are thinking, and maybe it's a really fair way of doing it. And you just say like, use as much tokens as you want. We're just going to bill that back to you. Plus, we're going to charge you $2,000 a month for like our creativeness and whatever else that we've created for you with this SaaS tool.
That's cool. So what's going to happen to the people?
Well, the people will all be well, I mean, what I hope will happen is that everyone will be starting their own companies, either like we discussed this on the last episode, but like you're soon going to have like text to product, so people just like dreaming up a e-commerce product, building it with low cost involved, selling that, maybe even drop shipping it, so you don't even need to sell anything up front. And be like, I hope that everyone's going to be doing their own like micro kind of business stuff. In the best case scenario. In the worst case scenario, revolution and death. I don't know, Joe. What do you think?
Hey, revolution is not always the worst, you know. After revolution, something new comes up. But yeah, no, I think it's going to be not an easy time. I think for all of us, actually, like, you know, I think there is going to be such a big reshuffle in terms of, you know, the world where, like, how we grew up with, like, you know, how work as general concept is done. And I think there will be probably quite I mean, I don't want to be pessimist, but I think AI can bring a lot of good, but I think it's going to have to bring a lot of very fast innovation to compensate for all of the people who would lose their jobs. I mean, you can already see it, what's happening with the news industry. It's really scary, and it's also very scary, again, back to the point about, you know, like content quality, just objective journalism, etc. If you actually follow the news and pay close attention, people should be disturbed that a lot of news corporations are basically cutting entire departments and replacing it with AI. So I think, as much as I am all up for AI, I think people should pay attention and, like, you know, not just be like, yay, it's great, because this is going to reverberate and we are all going to feel it fairly soon. So
yeah.
Right.
So Harry, we're coming to the 50 minutes, so we'll wrap it up. 2 more questions for you.
Okay.
Well, one more question, which is for the e-commerce sellers listening, you know, who think about branding. Any advice that you have, you know, having worked with some of the biggest brands out there, that you could tell someone who, I don't know, maybe is running a $1 million to 10 million kind of revenue business?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think you've essentially just got to think, like, what does your brand offer that other brands do not? and there might not be a difference. And so then you just have to think, okay, what can I kind of engineer, and how can I pull myself apart from the others in some way? And most of it, I think you can tell when a brand's kind of like artificially trying to create difference. I think it should always feel kind of organic and kind of something within the brand, within the way you set up, within the story of sleeping on the dance floor, whatever it is. I think you can kind of like, there has to be some kind of basis of truth, but you can then exaggerate, essentially. So you simplify your brand down in some very core essence, and when you exaggerate what you've simplified is kind of the crux of it, I think. So I mean, that's a very generic answer, but it's quite hard to answer for millions of businesses. But that is what
I think it's a very interesting answer. So yeah, I mean, I hope people listening found that useful. Okay, so we'll wrap up with a quick fire round. So just a sentence or two answer on this one, Harry. So first question is your favorite AI tool?
Midjourney. I think actually, because what Joe was saying, like, I love art and stuff, but I've just always been so crap at it. Like, I really can't draw at all. And so, like,
I remember those paintings of your dad you did, and I can testify that.
Yeah, that was a weird phase. Yeah. So, but that is like, I think it's so cool to be able to like turn words and some random thought into like a creation. And especially now, I think like maybe like a year ago, all Midjourney stuff kind of looked the same, and it kind of had this weird flat affect to it. Whereas now, like, you can properly do just all these such interesting styles and stuff. So I love that. I feel like I've unlocked a new thing. Like I can, it's just cool. I've got a new talent. It's not really talent.
Nice. Favorite custom GPT?
I don't know if I have one.
Fair enough.
What was your favorite custom GPT?
Oh, I would get in trouble if I said, I definitely, okay, I'm not going to say my favorite one, but those listening, go to my Twitter and you'll see it. But my second favorite one is the data analyst one. So ChatGPT have released themselves, like you can basically drop in data and ask it questions, and it is pretty good at kind of pulling out graphs and pie charts and the rest of it. So it's almost like having a data scientist on your team in terms of visualization and this kind of stuff. So super useful for someone who isn't gifted at Excel, which I'm not. Like when I was at Amazon, I used to get one of the guys I managed to basically build Excel. No, I'm not good at
it. We need to talk about this. We need to have a little crash course in Excel, because it's unacceptable to say something publicly.
I'm okay. I've got better, but I'm not an expert. But yeah. So that would be one of my favorite ones. Joe, do you want to give one, even though this is Harry's quick fire round?
Yeah, it's really not a quick fire, guys.
It's very slow.
It's a slow quick fire. I found one which is fantastic. It's I can't remember the name. I'm really shit with names. It basically, I can give it any page that I want, and I can ask it like to scrape the data of that page, to scrape the text of that page. Like I tested on e-content, by the way, today. Like you can ask it to summarize, you can ask it questions, so anything that you need from a page, and you can give it many, like it takes it. So it's cool.
Very cool. Okay, last quick fire question, Harry. AI net benefit or not for humanity?
Fuck it out. Okay, so nice quick.
Very quick fire. Very quickly, Harry, on that one.
I mean, it depends what you define by humanity, really. Like, because it's gonna really screw a lot of people up.
Net humanity, everyone, 8 billion, 9 billion people in the world.
Yeah. Weirdly, so I think it might be. It's getting. I'm going to say net benefit because it's Friday.
Yeah.
So I think probably on a high, but like it could really get us out of a few holes, but it could also dig far deeper holes. So it's kind of my top line of thought on that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if this is what you're thinking, but as you're thinking that, I was wondering if you were going to say net benefit for maybe like the bottom 4 billion people, net cost for the top 4 billion. potentially is like the white collar jobs that in your advertising agencies and whatnot go away. But then if you're sitting in
I don't know,
Bangladesh, you've got your personal tutor. I mean, that's brilliant. Or your personal healthcare.
Things very rarely, it very rarely works that way, doesn't it? Normally everyone gets screwed at the bottom. So
who knows? Yeah,
it'd be unusual for it to.
Now that is an interesting conversation, much more interesting than e-commerce. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I say it's probably net benefit to the top 0.4% or whatever.
Yeah, no, the top 0. The Sam Altmans, obviously net they're always winning. But I wonder, I don't know. Like, we once had a history teacher who always said like the history is the story of like the struggle of the top, the upper classes and the lower classes against the middle classes. And like basically, if you look at every single event, take Trump, take Brexit, take whatever you want to take, it's going to have like the people at the very top and the lower classes kind of against like the liberal middle class kind of thing. And like maybe AI is exactly the same story as French Revolution and everything else, where you have like this middle class, like one or two of those people win normally, and maybe this is one where the middle classes get absolutely obliterated. The people who didn't have healthcare and didn't have education, like great for them, and then obviously the barons at the top, it's good for them as well.
Maybe. Let's say net.
Cool. So I guess we're at the hour. So Harry, thanks so much for coming. Been a real pleasure to talk to you.
Thanks for having me. It's very cool to talk to you guys. This is like a whole new world to me. So so it's very exciting what you're doing.
And thanks for listening, everyone. And we'll see you next week to go a much more in-depth conversation about LLMs in search. So excited for that.
Cool. Have a good weekend.